So I wrote letters, challenging every misconception about homosexuality. 9 homes, 7 dogs, 47 years together, and still not spouses under the law. So we took our fight to the Supreme Court.
Jim Egan and Jack Nesbitt await a verdict on their fight for spousal rights.
Hello. We lost our case, but we made a difference.
As a result of Jim Egan's case, the Supreme Court ruled that sexual orientation is protected under the Charter of Rights, a landmark victory for the LGBTQ2 community.
The lift wasn't working and he was in pain, so I tried to lift him on my own. Yes, it's bad. I'll need help.
Can I help you with that?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Workplace injuries hurt the most at home.
Of the Rogers Super Sports Pack. All this for only $35.95 a month. Order through your remote on Channel 431 or call 1-888-ROGERS-1 today.
Welcome to Out of the Fog. I'm Melissa Royle. We are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day. That's the federal election of 2019. And to discuss it, we've got 2 really interesting guests this week. We have Craig Pollett from Municipalities NL to discuss the municipal issues in this election. And then we have Dr. Amanda Brittner, a professor of political science at Royle University, to talk about the issues and what the leaders and the campaigns are doing to try to get your vote. We'll be right back with more Out of the Fog.
Forky is the most important toy to Bonnie right now.
Hello. Hey, I'm trash.
We all have to make sure nothing happens to Forky.
Something happened to him.
Do I need to be worried?
Well, my guys are veterans. They'll hang in there.
No! Hey, watch it, buddy.
Where do we go?
You're watching Rogers TV, St. John's.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog. I'm here with Craig Pollett, the CEO of Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
I guess I should say welcome back to the show.
Yeah, good to be here.
So right now we're in the middle of a federal election. Exciting time for, you know, political geeks like us.
Yep.
But for municipalities, there's some really big issues on the table. And I know recently Municipalities NL held an emergency session on wastewater management.
Right.
Why is that issue so important right now?
It's a massive issue for us because there is a national policy that's been rolled out, national regulations, that talk about how you are required to treat sewer now, essentially. So national standards. And most of our members are not able to meet those standards right now. They were standards that were written for places that already have significant wastewater treatment or sewer treatment systems in place, and most of our members didn't have that in place. Even if they did, they weren't really meeting these national standards. So it's a big issue for us because there's a ton of work to do. There was a bunch of deadlines that the federal government had for registering your system with them and that sort of thing. Most of our members missed those deadlines because it was, from my perspective, pretty poorly communicated to them. And they're actually sort of under the gun right now to deliver because They're, at this point, breaking national standards, breaking national regulations, and there's some pretty significant penalties for municipalities, including jail time and multi-million-dollar fines if they don't meet the standards that are being laid out. So it's a big, big issue for us.
So the fines sound expensive, but so do the projects. So how big a role does the cost of this play on, I guess, the ability of municipalities to do these projects?
It's, well, there's, at our event that you mentioned, we said, look, we need money and we need time. And that's the two things we're looking for. The money part is massive. So to build the wastewater treatment systems that we're being asked to build is going to cost somewhere in the range of $600 to $700 million for the whole province. I know the city of St. John's, which does St. John's Mount Pearl Paradise with the Riverhead system, Riverhead facility, they're looking at $200 million just for theirs. When you consider that all the municipalities in the province, including the provincial government and the federal government, we collectively spend about $80 to $100 million a year on all infrastructure, roads, bridges, arenas, everything. To add another $700 million to that bill is massive. We also have drinking water. We have a lot of drinking water systems that need to be upgraded. To bring all those drinking water systems up to snuff, about another $425 million. So you're talking about $1 billion above and beyond what we already do.
And in this meeting that you had, I know there was attendance from some of the federal MPs and also from some MHAs. What came out of that meeting, and how are you encouraged or troubled by how this is playing out in the federal election right now?
Well, we actually had all 7 of the, at the time, Liberal MPs attend. And it was an excellent meeting. There was 100+ municipal folks there. As you mentioned, there were some MHAs. There was a lot of people in the room. A lot of frustration, I'm not going to lie, a lot of venting up front, but really positive work as the day went on. And I think the two things that came out of it for us that seemed to meet the initial needs of our members and our potential things that could happen are a doubling of the gas tax. So in the last budget, the federal government doubled the amount of money that goes to the provinces, to municipalities, from the gas tax fund. For our province, that was about an extra $30 million. What we're asking for is for that doubling to be made permanent. The gas tax is it's like the super fund for municipalities. It's very easy to use. It's targeted the way municipalities want it to be targeted. There's not a lot of strings attached, a lot of auditing, a lot of transparency, but they're not telling you how you can spend this money. So we're saying we'd like to see that doubling made permanent. The other thing that came out of it is way back in 2012, 2013, these regulations came in. Every municipality had a window to apply for, they call it transitional authorization. And there's a really long name that includes the word flow and sewer, and it's disgusting. But they said, look, you tell us what your readings are, what you're doing right now, and we'll give you till 2030, 2040 to get this work done. Most municipalities in this province didn't even know this transitional authorization was a thing, so they didn't apply. So what we've said to the federal government and what we said to the MPs that were in the room is we'd like that opportunity to apply again. So open up a window, a year or whatever, and give our members a chance to apply for transitional authorization again. And that's going to take a lot of the heat off of our members. So a little bit more funding through an existing system and a little bit more time to at least figure out what the plan is.
And it's interesting to hear about how much play there is between municipalities and the federal government, because I think we tend to think of municipalities falling under kind of provincial guidelines or provincial law. I mean, really, they're creatures of the provincial statutes, right? So, and there's a minister for municipalities in this province. But what do you see are the other links outside of wastewater and drinking water between the federal government and municipalities, and where you can kind of advocate for municipalities during a time like this in a federal election?
Right. Well, two of the big ones right away are funding and regulations. So the federal government is a big player right now in funding municipal infrastructure, in all sorts of infrastructure. So we've been sort of pulled in. They pulled us into the discussion. They do a lot of environmental regulation work that we're now getting caught up in. So there's a way for us to make sure that those regulations, like the wastewater ones, are coming out in the most effective way possible. But the federal government is engaged in affordable housing and a national housing strategy, huge issue for a lot of municipalities, a hidden issue in our province and a lot of municipalities. They're also involved in things like broadband. Broadband access, high-speed internet access is not necessarily a municipal thing, but it's a community thing, and it's a development thing. So municipalities get involved. And they're also involved in terms of national frameworks for rural development and regional development. So we get engaged on that level as well. There's an awful lot. The Constitution doesn't connect us, but the things we're working on connect us.
That's a good way to put it. The, you know, we talk a lot about what we're seeking in the, you know, in federal party policy platforms and all this.
Yep.
But you know, I noticed recently that the Liberal leader Justin Trudeau had a kind of some meetings with mayors about issues like handguns and some other issues. Do you ever worry that maybe too much is being downloaded on municipalities and maybe they're not equipped to deal with it? Or
constantly.
Does that happen as well?
Yeah. And that's there's a fine balance, right? You know, at the national level, within the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, there's a constant conversation about our role in nation building, and that municipalities and their leaders are democratically elected representatives of the people. We should be involved in these important discussions, and we should. But anytime you dip your toe in that water, there's a chance of falling in, right? And that's a balance that we try to strike all the time. We face the same thing here in the province, talking to the provincial government about issues around health care, all kinds of things that we get pulled into that we have to decide this is how far we're going to go and no farther. And I think you're seeing that on the national level, right? You're seeing some of the mayors of the larger metropolitan municipalities, the cities, who, gun control, other things are big issues for their constituents. So that's how they decide, yeah, we're going to step into this area and have a conversation. But yeah, downloading is a really dirty word in our sector. It happens a lot. And we have to make sure that while we're contributing to the national discussion, we're not getting pulled into something that could sink us.
Right. Something else you've been really outspoken on, and you kind of touched on it there with your rural development, is the demographic issue in our province.
Yeah.
We have an aging population, moving from rural into the more urban centers.
Yep.
Why is that such an issue for municipalities specifically?
Well, demographics is everything, right? Demographics is, and again, we went through a provincial election where we didn't really talk about demographics all that much. We're in the middle of a federal election, not really talking about demographics all that much.
Well, everywhere else is going up.
Yeah, that's true. Although in places like Vancouver and Toronto, they're dealing with massive changes to how to deliver services because of the nature of the people who are living there. For us, it's a different issue. It underlies everything that we do in the sector. So getting people to run has always been a big issue in this province for the last 30 years. It's becoming an even more difficult challenge now because there are fewer people left to actually step up and run for public office. The last municipal election, we tracked how all those elections went, and we said, we're going to sort of track the ones that don't have enough running, maybe just have enough running, or maybe have one or two extras running. So maybe 7 people for 5 seats or something like that. 70% of the elections were in that category. So only 30% of the municipal elections that happened actually had multiple people
really competitive.
Extra. Yeah, really competitive elections. But it also affects tax base. It affects the diversity in the community, and diversity leads to more entrepreneurship and better job growth and more interesting development and that sort of thing. So it's at the heart of everything a community wants to be. So if we don't get a handle on it, then we're in for a struggle.
And going back to the federal election, is there anything that you could be looking for parties to put forward that could help with our demographic issues here and thereby helping the municipalities?
Oh, I think working on immigration strategies. We have the Atlantic immigration pilot happening in this neck of the woods. I know there's a movement across the Atlantic provinces to try to make that a permanent thing. We do pretty well. We're doing better lately in terms of immigration and immigrants who stay, newcomers who stay and set up shop and start families and grow businesses and that sort of thing. that's not traditionally where we've been, so we need to keep on that trajectory. So anything they can do to help with that, I think, is a good thing. Anything they can do to help municipal infrastructure and other public services deal with the changing nature of communities is going to be a good thing. So one of the things that's we talk about all the time is a rural lens. How do we, and when I say rural lens, across Canada, the definition of rural typically is under 100,000.
That's
so
almost all of us.
We're rural. We're all rural. But when you're planning funding programs, when you're planning infrastructure programs, when you're deciding what kind of healthcare innovation to fund, having that rural lens, what's the impact going to be on smaller places? That is a really critical piece, because the assumption that what's good for one is good for all simply doesn't work, right? We found that out with the wastewater regulations. They were regulations designed for large metropolitan cities, and they are not working in this place. So place-based policy development is what we're looking for.
Excellent. Well, that gives us lots to think about from a municipal perspective in this election, and so thanks for sharing that with us. And,
my pleasure.
We'll see you again next time.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks so much, Craig. We'll be right back with more Out of the Fog.
All right, girls.
Mom, you said it's played again.
Workplace injuries hurt the most at home.
When my legs get stronger, I want to play basketball, volleyball, I want to run. I was sick when I was a little baby. I had meningitis.
Even after they did the amputations, they said that it was likely he would not make it.
To now, you throw him on that bike and off he goes.
My bike helps me get my legs stronger.
Without the ramps, being able to afford his limbs and devices would be difficult.
Thank you for helping me get around.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog. I'm here with Dr. Amanda Brittner, Professor of Political Science at Memorial University. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you.
We're 2 weeks out-ish from a federal election. I know you've been watching it really closely out of, I guess, professional and personal interest.
Totally.
I feel like all elections, people are looking for the ballot box question or what's making a difference in voters' minds. Can you narrow it down to one issue, or what are people looking at when they're going to make their decision?
It's a tough question. I mean, so traditionally when we think about voters making decisions, there's all kinds of factors that come into play. What party they normally support, where they're from, who their family supported in the past, and things like that. Issues, of course, party leaders, candidates, things like that. In this election so far, I've been trying to figure out kind of what is the issue, or what is the thing that's going to sort of sway voters, change their minds, or so on. And I can't really point to a thing. I mean, there's been a few things that have come out so far over the last couple of weeks that could have an influence, or they could not, right? And it kind of depends on how the kind of chips fall. So thinking about, for example, the SNC-Lavalin scandal could have an impact, right? Thinking about the blackface, brownface could have an impact. Thinking about, climate marches and things like that could have an impact. The state of the economy, issues around healthcare, issues around kind of middle class and sort of economic success for families and things like that. These are all issues that are getting talked about. But I don't think that I could put my finger on one thing that would, change the election, at least so far.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the media coverage and kind of the casual conversation about the election has been about past behavior of leaders. Like you mentioned the blackface and brownface of Justin Trudeau.
Right.
It's also the issues around whether Andrew Scheer was an insurance broker or not, or where he lived or didn't, or all of this stuff. Do you feel like that helps the voter get informed about who the leaders are, or does it distract from more important conversations we should be having?
This is kind of a classic question in political science, and as a nerd, I like to discuss classic questions all the time. But I think we have this idea that in a democracy, in a healthy democracy, voters are well informed, really engaged, thinking about issues, debating thinking about stuff, doing research, deliberating with their neighbors and that's just not the way life works, right? We all have families, we have jobs, we have hobbies, we have other things to do. So our focus on politics is not that strong, let's say, for most of us. Some of us are weird, like me and you. And so I think that, you know, we have this idea about what a healthy democracy looks like, and we don't think that that includes personality or past behavior. But if you think about it, so assuming that we don't all have all the time to become fully informed, and assuming that even if we did, our brains couldn't handle that much information at once, right? Which they really can't. Then we can take these, they're not so much shortcuts, but we can take these decision-making routes. So every day you meet somebody new, right? Every day you decide how you feel about that person. Every day you make snap judgments. Are you worth my time? Do I like you? Do I not like you? Are you smart? Are you competent? Are you trustworthy? And so on. And we're pretty good at this. As human beings, we have to be. We take these shortcuts. And so, in a sense, if you think about it, deciding how you feel about a given party leader is actually not a bad indication of how they're going to be in office. This is the person who's going to run the country. If they're not trustworthy, if they seem like an idiot, these are problems, right? And we are, as human beings, able to make that decision. And so I don't really see it as being a problem to look at past performance or past behavior or what we did as teenagers. And of course, we've all done really dumb stuff, right? I have done a lot of things that I regret and wouldn't want, you know, the world to know about. And I'm always grateful that I was kind of, you know, in a world before social media when I was, you know, in high school and stuff. But at the same time, these are not bad indications of future performance in office because policies change, platforms change, context changes, right? And so leaders and parties are going to change the way they deal with things. It's really hard to change your personality. I think we all have dated people that we wish we could have changed, right? And we know how ineffective that is. Can't do it, exactly. So I think that it's okay for us as voters to think about these other things, and it's not a democratic crisis. It's actually a good, solid way of determining how things will be in the future. That's kind of my take on it.
Oh, I love that. And in terms of evaluating performance, just this week we had kind of the first or the last, the main English leaders debate, where all of the leaders came, perhaps too many of them if you ask some people. But is there anything that kind of jumped out at you at that could help people make the decisions? You know, in a world now where we're just kind of in constant barrage of media and leaders tours during an election, can that help people narrow their votes?
It can if they watch it, right? So I think that's the thing to think about, is that debates are hugely informative, right? So watching these leaders interact with one another, talk to each other, challenge each other, this is all really, really valuable stuff. Problem is, most of us don't watch debates, right? They're not all in their jammies with their glass of wine like me and you are. But at the same time, but the media is watching, right? So media coverage of the debates is the #1 source of information that voters are going to get about the debates.
Since the debates have happened, I'm not sure if there's kind of updated polls since then, but you know, nowadays there's just so many polls. Before you used to hear a couple before the election, now you see new ones every day from companies, from parties, locally, federally. But then you think, you know, the last election, not many people predicted Justin Trudeau's Liberals would get a majority. Not many people predicted Trump or Brexit or lots of major elections. You know, what are the polls showing now, and how much stock do you think we can put in them?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that you're right, that there are so many polls right now, so it's hard to keep track, and the same rule about debates, about who's watching them and how they're getting their information, applies to polling information, right? Because getting new polls every day or every 2 days is only really more information if the people are reading these polls, right? Which most people are not. And so, again, it's all about kind of media coverage, media assumptions about who's winning and who's losing the horse race and so on. Which may or may not influence voters. So the last poll I saw was a few days ago, and it had, you know, the Liberals and the Conservatives pretty much neck and neck, and it had the other parties kind of trailing behind. So I think that that's probably about right. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of polling companies right now and sort of efforts to aggregate these polls. So take them all at once, feed them into a machine, have it spit out kind of an average, control for house effects, things like that, and then have some sense of what's going to happen. But it's still 2 weeks left, right? Anything could happen. Nobody predicted blackface, brownface, for example. People could predict the climate march because that was planned in advance. And so there's things that are going to happen between now and Election Day that could have an impact on the election outcome, and we just don't know about it yet. Or nothing could happen, and we could still not know what's going to happen next. So,
and you say that these kind of polls, you know, when they hit the media, when they're kind of, you know, mainstream acceptance that, you know, say, the Liberals and the Conservatives are tied for most likely to win. Can that affect people in terms of, you know, okay, well, I don't want to vote for one of the smaller parties because that might prevent the person I don't mind from getting in, and then the person I hate is going to get in?
Yeah, you're like describing a kind of strategic voting situation.
Yeah, I guess in this situation, is there a concern, I guess, for these parties that people will not vote for the NDP or for the Greens because it would, you know, cause Prime Minister Scheer? Is that
totally possible? I've also heard about organizations like there's I forget what it's called, like Park Your Vote, something like that, where if you don't like the main parties, you can choose to vote for the Green Party instead as a way. I don't know. It's hard to do this, right? And I think that with changes in social media and with changes in technology, we can coordinate a little bit more because we can talk via the internet about, okay, well, you're in this riding in BC and I'm in this riding in St. John's and I don't like my candidates, you don't like your candidates, let's swap candidates, right? Well, maybe this works, but this is a lot to orchestrate. And I would say that it's probably not the norm. So estimates that I've seen from colleagues of mine about strategic voting is that between 3% and 10% of voters vote in the way that you're describing right now. So there's like a maximum that's going to happen in. And so it's not huge, but it's not nothing. And so, yeah.
Perfect. Moving now into this province, in Newfoundland and Labrador, are there any races that you're looking forward to that could be the most interesting?
I like to follow the race in my riding. So I live in St. John's East, and so that's the riding where we see the combination of Nick, Jack, and Jody who are running against one another. I think that's an interesting riding because it was a bit of an upset last time around.
Yeah.
And so I think that it could go in either direction at this point. I mean, all bets are off, but I would say that it's definitely a race between two candidates, the NDP candidate and the Liberal candidate. The Conservative candidate has, I think, a bigger kind of jump to make to get in there.
Are there many kind of issues in Newfoundland and Labrador that are making an appearance in this election, though, or are we voting on kind of the record of the party incumbent now, or how much we like the individuals on the ballot?
I think that I don't know that I would point to an issue for our province that is going to shape the election, but I think this gets at the question about, okay, what does it mean to be a Newfoundlander and a Canadian, Newfoundlander and Labradorian and a Canadian? Because we can think about national issues and still be here, and we don't have to make a decision based on local issues that might be coming up, right? So I think there's lots of local issues that are plaguing us right now, right? So thinking about Muskrat Falls, thinking about population decline, thinking about the economy, oil, all that kind of stuff. Whether or not those things are going to affect our national vote, I wouldn't say that they would, but they could. Again, this goes to like anything could happen. I don't want to make predictions. So.
Do you think Newfoundlanders ever kind of look at the national campaigns, how much attention they're paying here in Newfoundland and Labrador? I know Andrew Scheer was only here for about an hour or two. The Prime Minister only did one appearance here. We don't have a lot of national campaign attention in this province.
Right.
Do you think that can affect how people make their decisions?
I think that it affects our identity as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians more than it affects what we do at the ballot box. So I think that, Canada is a big country, and so for the parties and leaders to kind of travel across the country is really, really challenging. And I think that folks on the West Coast think the exact same way. I mean, the West Coast of Canada, not the province. And so I think that we all across the country look at this and think about this and decide whether or not that means that we're being shunned by power. But I'm not sure if that actually translates into votes.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You have
Total
such
pleasure.
Great insights as always, and I'll be looking forward to election night. I know you will be too.
Awesome. Yep, super fun.
We're back with more Out of the Fog.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Thanks for watching Out of the Fog. Hope you enjoyed all of the election talk this week, and we'll see you next time on Out of the Fog.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
With NHL Center Ice, you get a premium ticket to the games you want every night of the season. With up to 37 out-of-market games a week to choose from, you'll get more goals, more saves, more non-stop action from the teams you love. NHL Center Ice, part of the Rogers Super Sports Pack. All this for only $35.95 a month. Order through your remote on Channel 431 or call 1-888-ROGERS-1 today.
We were born in Canada. We spoke English. On the streets, we weren't welcome. But on the field, we were the Asahi. Vancouver's champions.